Aloha friends, it's Robert Stehlik. Welcome to another episode of the Blue Planet Show. In today's interview, I'm speaking with Clifford from Unifoil. He's in South Africa, I'm in Hawaii, so there's like a 12-hour time difference. There's a little bit of a delay and so on, but it's a great conversation. And we get into detail on foil design, tips for beginners, tips for more advanced people, all kinds of technical things about the foils. I'm trying to wrap my head around all the different aspects of how everything works together, and Clifford's really good at explaining it and kind of making sense of it. And obviously he's tried a lot of different things. He's one of the first people to come out with the high aspect foil, and so he's definitely one of the pioneers in foil design. Really good conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up if you like it. Make sure to subscribe to the Blue Planet Surf YouTube channel down below. I'll put some links down in the description as well for the Unifoil website. You can watch the Blue Planet Show right here on YouTube, or you can also listen to it on your favorite podcast app. Just search for the Blue Planet Show. And without further ado, here is Clifford. Okay, Clifford, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, Robert. Thanks for having me on, man. What a privilege. Awesome to finally meet you.
Yeah, glad to finally get you on the show. So here in Hawaii, it's 8 p.m. in the evening, and for you, it's 8 a.m. in South Africa, in Jeffreys Bay. That's where you're at,
right? That's right. Yeah. Just the start of the day.
Yeah. So how long have you been living in Jeffreys Bay, or is you born and raised there? Or?
No. I was actually born in Johannesburg. But at a young age, I moved over to England, and then I'd be coming over to Jeffreys Bay on holiday. So I've actually got a house here. I've been coming here for 20 years, and then about 10 years ago, I actually moved to Jeffreys Bay.
Excellent. So I'm kind of trying to start this show off the season with some tips for beginners. Last year, I kind of had it at the end of the show. I asked the question, what are some tips for beginners? But I wanted to kind of turn it around. So for the beginners watching, what are some good tips for people that want to get into wing foiling?
For myself, I only started wing foiling last year, and my biggest tip is to use the right equipment. That is critical. So myself being a bit of a heavier rider, I'm about 104 kilos, about 230 pounds. To use the right equipment is essential, especially if you're in light wind. So my advice is to be overpowered. So rather a wing that is a little bit too big, a board that is too big, and a foil that is too big. It just makes the whole learning process so much easier. If you use equipment that's too small, then it becomes a struggle. It's just hard work. It's a nightmare. So in the beginning, overpowered for sure. If possible, I would recommend 1 or 2 sessions behind a boat, just to be pulled behind a boat, and just to break down the whole process, so that you don't have a wing in your hands and a foil trying to do both at the same time. So if you can get going with just the foil behind a boat, a tow session, get just the feeling of the foil coming up out of the water, great. And then with the wing itself, going on just a normal SUP board, walking on dry land, getting a feel for how the wing works, and then combining the two together. I find that works really well. And of course, nothing beats having someone who's got experience. If you go off by yourself, it's difficult. But if you've got an instructor or someone who's already wing foiling, and they watch you and they can tell you, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, try this, that advice is gold. Highly recommended. If you go to like a school or something, rather go someone who's already competent at wing foiling. It just makes the whole process, the whole journey so much more pleasant. Yeah,
those are some great tips, I think. And I think most of us are, everybody's still kind of new to the sport. So we kind of remember what it was like to learn and are happy to help others too. So yeah, just ask for help. And just keep in mind too that it can be kind of dangerous in the beginning too. Like if you fall on your foil and, like as a surfer, like usually you try to kind of catch yourself if you're falling, but that's kind of the wrong instinct when you're foiling. You want to kind of just eject as as quickly as possible.
100%. 100%. I think in the beginning days, when you're treading water, you only kick the foil once or twice, and you learn very quickly. Don't tread water. Rather hang on the board. But with foiling, you learn very quickly. Don't try and save it. Rather, as you say, you eject off the foil and get going again. It's so much safer, so much easier.
Okay, I'm just pulling up your website here. So, out of your lineup, which foil do you like for someone your size? Like, what foil did you start on?
I started on a hyper. I started on we used to do quite a big one, a 250. I then switched over to the 210, and that's what I use now at the moment. So I don't know if you know much about the hyper. The hyper's been around for quite a few years. So we're actually working on a version 2 at the moment, which will be released very soon. The hyper ones have been out now for 27, about 5 years now. So they've been around for quite a while.
Yeah, so that's actually a high aspect wing. Yeah, I mean, so you were one of the first to kind of to bring out a wing that was kind of had a really high aspect ratio, right? Like one of the first to bring out a wing like that.
Yeah. So what happened was I was working with Ivan and Nathan from Signature at the time, and they started doing downwinding here in Cape Town. And I said to Ivan, can you put a GPS on Nathan and just see what sort of speeds is he doing? And I knew immediately that a high aspect would be very efficient. So I started doing prototypes, and I did the first high aspect foil. And watching those GPS graphs was amazing to see that he could be on the foil for so long. Because I mean, back then, if I was on the foil for 60 seconds, this is a long time, and he's riding for 13, 14, 15 minutes at a time. So it was just pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Nathan seems like a super talented kid too. Yeah,
very much.
I think he actually beat Kaileni across the channel in the Molokai race the first time he came over here, and just like I guess Kaileni was able to pump upwind and pass him. So
were you there?
So sorry.
Did you go to that event?
Actually, I did that race too myself. Yeah, I saw them flying by me. I was on a stand-up paddleboard.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh, that must have been amazing. I was here in
Kaileni went like a few feet right next to me, and he was like going twice as fast as I was, at least twice as fast, which is kind of actually demoralizing.
Yeah. But, I was watching that event from here in South Africa because they had all the GPS markers on all the riders, and then as you know, the foils guys started right at the end, and it was nerve-wracking. And I mean, it's 3:00 in the morning here. And I'm trying to be quiet, watching this race. And I'm at my parents' house. The next day I'm flying out to Canada. And, I'm chewing my nails like, what's going on? And then, to watch those little blips on that map, travel between all the riders and just blast through. It was certainly an amazing highlight. It was, phenomenal.
Awesome. Yeah, that was amazing. So, but anyways, let's get into like the whole relationship with Signature Foils and the foil design and all that. I have lots of questions about that, but let's start off with your just your background. Like like how did you grow up? How did you get into water sports? How did you get into foiling and foil design and so on? Just start in the beginning.
Right. So, born in Johannesburg, I really enjoyed. I went to a technical school. I really enjoyed engineering. I got my first job at an engineering company doing fluid dynamics, doing hydraulics, doing press design, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the whole process of designing something, drawing something, and then going down to the workshop and actually seeing it being manufactured and being made and then being installed on site and actually being utilized. I got a real kick out of that. It's something that I really enjoyed. So at a young age, I moved over to England, and I was staying in England, but then I'd come back to South Africa every year. And I think it was back in 2002, somewhere around there. I was in Cape Town, and I bought these two flexifoil kites that they stack together, and you're flying them, and I was, the power of these kites was really awesome. And I sat there on the beach, and I see this guy come over the road, and he's got a helmet on, and he's got this board under his one arm and this package under his other arm. And he comes to the beach and he rolls this thing out, and it's just this massive long, I don't know what it was, and he starts pumping it up, and yeah, it's this kite. And I was like, whoa, I'd seen it on TV, but to actually have someone doing it right here in front of me. And he was the only one on what we call Kite Beach in Cape Town. And when I saw that, I was like, I've got to do this, So the following year, I bought a kite, obviously a Cabrina black tip. I'm sure you know those kites. But I think everybody started on one of those kites. And yeah, that pretty much started my kite surfing journey. But I never got anywhere. I just mowed the lawn and did the occasional jump because I was living in England, and I'd only come over for a month or two at a time. So I never really progressed. And then in about 2015, I think it was 2014, somewhere on there, I moved to a little town here in South Africa called Knysna, and I had a whole bunch of mates who were into kite surfing. And yeah, naturally I started up again, started kite surfing, and started progressing a little bit better. And that's when I saw a video on, I think it was on YouTube or somewhere, of hydrofoiling. I was like, oh, we've got to try this. This looks cool. It looks difficult. It actually looks impossible. And I was with a mate of mine, and it was like, well, you're only going to know if you try it. So I had a workshop doing CNCing. I did a cutting service, and so I just knocked up some molds and made this foil. And we went behind the boat, and it's just this meter-long mast, and this thing picking you up out of the water. It's just this totally surreal, crazy feeling. I mean, I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was awesome.
So your first foils, you actually CNC'd the mold, and you laid up the foils inside a mold, like right from the start?
The first, all my front wings have always been in molds. The very first mast that I made was just wrapped around a wood core. But from there, everything was done, from CNC molds. It's just so much easier than having to sit and sand apart afterwards.
Right. So when you were in England, you studied engineering in England, or what were you doing in England?
No, I moved to England. I was 23, somewhere around there. And
what made you decide to leave South Africa and go to England?
What happened was they made it possible to get a 2-year work visa. So you could go over to England and you could travel around and go and check the place out. And I was only planning to go for a year, and I came back to South Africa, and all my friends are still doing the same thing. Everyone's still going to the same places, and nothing had changed. And I was like, well, I've only got a year left on my visa, and I'm not going to have this opportunity again. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back, and yeah. So I actually met someone, and I ended up staying there for 10 years.
Oh, wow. So where did you live in England?
All over. But I stayed in London for a couple of years, and then I moved north to Peterborough. I was in Luton for a short amount of time, then up to Peterborough for 8 years.
Okay. So you never like you said I guess in school you enjoyed engineering and so on, but did you have like a formal education in like aeronautical engineering or foil design or wing design or anything like that, or just it's all self-taught more or less?
Yeah, on the aeronautics side, yes, I did go to college, but I didn't do aeronautics or hydrodynamics. That all came much later on, from radio controlled aircraft.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Kane while I interviewed him, and he has like a really good understanding of the whole engineering side of the foils as well. But I guess he kind of just taught himself and how to use the programs and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty impressive, and he has like a background in glider airplanes or model airplanes and so on. So, but anyways, yeah, that's interesting. I'm just curious, like how you figured all those things out. I guess just by trial and error, a lot of it. I mean, I guess there is no engineering class for hydrofoils, really, right? I mean, it's
very niche at the moment.
Yeah.
I think maybe in the future they'll do something, but the principles behind a hydrofoil in a small aircraft is very much the same. The end result is very different, but the principles of flight are very much the same. It's once you've learned to design just the basics of aircraft, you can design a reasonably good foil.
Yeah, I guess the big thing is that water is much more dense than air, obviously. So it's that, and the fluid dynamics are different probably too. But yeah, I don't know that much about it. Okay, but anyway, so you back in South Africa, learning to kite, and then starting to foil, building your own foil. So carry on from there.
Yeah, so made this first foil and realized that it was way too small. It was only about a 600 square centimeter. So you needed like 20 kilometers an hour, whatever it was, plus just for the foil to engage that you could lift up. So the wipeouts were classic. Every session you'd come out with this, whiplash. So continued designing different ones and trying different ideas. And eventually I started getting this pile of all these prototype foils, stuck in the corner of the workshop. And I didn't want to go and just throw them in the bin. The amount of time that you put into them and the cost of the materials. So I thought, well, let me sell them. So I put them on our local secondhand for sale website, Gumtree. And from doing that, I had one guy buy one, and then his friend phoned him and was like, listen, you made a foil for my friend. Can you make me one? And slowly but surely, I just started making all these foils, and just one after the next, and it just snowballed. But that was all kite foils. And then my wife, she's from Canada. She wanted to move to Canada, so we started the process of getting my visa to move to Canada. And we left. We were in Eisen at the time, so we moved to Jeffreys Bay. And when I was here, I was like, well, I've got to do something while I'm waiting for my visa. I wasn't expecting it to be a couple of months kind of thing. And in the end, it took just over a year. So while I was here in Jeffreys, a good mate of mine, he saw one of my foils in the back of my truck. And he's like, what is that? And I was like, well, it's a kite foil. So he's like, because he's a surfer. So I think it was probably a week later, he phoned me up and he goes, listen, can you make one of these things for surfing? I was like, yeah, I can't see why not. Let's try it, So back to the CNC. At that time, I sold my business. I didn't have access to a CNC. I had to go to another mate of mine's place to use his CNC. So I made up this foil, the surf foil, and it's actually Gumby. So we were actually on the way to the beach, and this thing was busy curing. That's how excited we were to get in the water. So anyway, he jumped in the water, and he started paddling out. And a few minutes later, a couple of his mates pitched up, and so they don't know that there's a foil at the bottom of his board. He's just lying there in the water. And the wave comes and he paddles to this wave and he stands up and this foil picks up out of the water. The guys around him were like screaming their heads off. I could hear them from the beach, because it was unheard of, it was unseen. He's literally the first guy, probably in South Africa, I don't know, but definitely the first guy the Eastern Cape that had been on a surf foil. So that pretty much started the journey of surf foils. And from there, I had to, because I didn't have access to a CNC machine anymore, I had to machine up steel molds. So I went into an engineering shop, and that is when I came out with the Vortex 175, which later on came to be a very popular foil.
Okay.
It was about around that time that I spoke to Ivan from Signature, and we started chatting, and it's like, well, can we collaborate on this foil, and can he use the foil design? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And at that time, foiling was still pretty much, foil surfing was pretty much in its infancy. And I'd never ridden anyone else's foil before, so I didn't really know what foils were supposed to feel like. I've only ridden my own designs, my own feel, and I'd never ridden anyone else's foil, so I wasn't too sure, what is this supposed to feel like? But I just aimed for having as even foot pressure as possible on the front and the back of the foil. And yeah, that was pretty much the design that put us on the map, if I can put it that way.
So Signature Foils, they approached you because they heard that you're making good foils, and then basically you started making designs for them. So I mean, yeah. So how did that relationship work, and then how did you start your own brand? Like while you're also, because it's a little bit confusing, because basically their foils are exactly the same as yours, or are they different?
No. Only when we first started.
Okay.
So the Vortex, they called it the Stealth, and then ours, the Hyper, they called it the Albatross.
Mm-hmm.
But they have got their own designer now, because obviously we're totally independent now.
Okay. So, and then I guess your newest foil is the Vortex, right?
No, the Viper.
The Viper. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so the Viper is kind of like, from what I understand, a little bit of a blend of between, like, it's like a little bit of a blend between the best aspects from both the Vortex and the Hyper, right?
That's right. So our Vortex is our low aspect foil, which was very popular in the early stages, and everyone's pretty much transitioned over to medium aspect or high aspect foils, just because of the efficiency. The efficiency is so much higher on a narrow wing. So what everybody wanted was a foil that surfed like a Vortex but pumped like a Hyper. So then I did a collaboration with Adam Bennett, and this is what we made, was the Viper.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So in the early days, yeah, you had the collaboration with Signature Foil, and you still design their foils, right?
No,
Today,
they've got someone else who's doing their designing now.
I see. Okay. So, and then what made you decide to start Unifoil? Or how did that get started?
That's just from selling the foils out of my workshop. It just snowballed, and eventually it's like you got to come up with a name brand. I was like, oh, that is a lot harder than you think. It's not easy to come up with a name brand, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
And there's so many different names of what do you call your product? What are you going to call your brand? And in the beginning, I actually had names of various fishes, which I called the foils, but I still didn't have a brand name. And the one day I was just thinking about it, and I just thought, uni, being one, being like a unicycle, and I thought unifoil, and I was like, that's it. That is what I'm going to call this brand, Unifoil. It relates to being number one, and it relates to being, a single foil that you're riding, and that's pretty much how I came up with the name Unifoil.
Yeah, like a unicorn.
that's still coming.
Okay. And Adam Bennett's is an amazing foiler. I mean, yeah, like he's
Phenomenal.
So smooth. Like, so a lot of, I guess, having good team riders like that, I'm sure, is very helpful, right? In designing the foils.
Yeah, no, he's got crazy talent. I think it's absolutely imperative that you have a team rider who has the ability to give you feedback that you can work on. Yeah, very, very important.
Okay, so yeah, I remember Kane DeWild came over to Oahu for this event that we had a few years ago that was called the 100 Wave event, and you had like a team, and the team had to try to catch 100 waves, and he had one of those signature albatross foils, and well, they had a whole team of signature team, but Kane DeWild was just like pumping around in circles, like catching one wave after the other, just kept like, that's the first time we really saw someone just like pumping like that. It looked, I mean, he makes it look easy, but
Yeah.
So explain to me why are high aspect foils so efficient? What makes them more efficient than medium aspects, and what are the good and the bad? What's the good and the bad of the high aspect? Like what? Yeah. So just kind of talk a little bit about that. And then also why you went back to like a more medium aspect versus the very high aspect.
So the way I came up with the high aspect is a wing that has a very short chord line is always going to have less drag than a wing with a long chord line, because it's the amount of time that the water takes to travel over the chord. That's what gives you your drag. So if you can reduce that down, you have less drag. So the high aspect foil was designed to be as efficient as possible. It was purely designed for straight line, to get from A to B as efficiently as possible. So when I started designing that, Ivan gave me GPS records just showing the average speed that Nathan was riding at. I think it was 21 or 23 kilometers an hour, somewhere out there. So I tried to optimize the efficiency at that speed to get as little drag as possible. So high aspect foils is all about efficiency. The disadvantage of high aspect foils is they do tend to not turn as well. So being such a wide wingspan, they're not really intended to be ridden in the surf as much. That was my theory back then, and then these high aspect foils reached Hawaii, and there were some riders that started using them in the surf, and I was like, no, you're not supposed to do that. They're not made for that. But the guys were ripping on them, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. That they got the ability to turn that foil as sharp as what they could. But that's the real disadvantage, is if you're an average foiler, to get a high aspect to really turn, it doesn't want to. It tends to track pretty much, on rails. So that's why we came up with the mid-aspect foils. Mid-aspect foils for surf foiling is just way better. These Vipers, when I go out on a session, I actually just feel like I'm Adam Bennett, when you're doing these turns, because you just, what I found with the high aspect stuff was, you sort of went along with for the ride. It was going to the left, and it's like, okay, we're going to the left, and you pretty much follow the foil where it wants to go, and it's a bit of a wild beast. And changing over to the Viper, you just think turn left, and you're doing this nice, turn to the left. They just turn incredibly well. Fair enough, the efficiency isn't as high as the hypers, but it's not very far behind, in terms of pumping.
So
when we did
how
these,
did you achieve that? And sorry to interrupt you, but how did you achieve that turning, the more turnability in the Viper versus the
well,
Hyper?
just automatically by going to a low aspect foil, it's going to turn better. That immediately it's going to allow it to turn better. Then the hyper profile is actually quite a slow profile. It's not a very fast foil. It was only made to cruise at, like I said, 22, 25 k's an hour. And it is a very easy lifting foil. And the Viper, though, has got a completely different profile. It's quite a bit faster than the hyper profile. But the front curvature of the wing also helps it to turn. A bit of twist in the wing also helps it to turn. So there's different things that you can do to the foil to change its characteristics.
So a little bit of curve in the curvature of the foil itself, yeah.
So what happens is, on aircraft you've got dihedral, where the wings are like this. So when you're flying with an aircraft that has dihedral, when the wings start to tilt over to the side, you have less lift on the wing that is tilted. So then automatically it self-rightens. So now on the hydrofoil, it's the opposite. You actually put a curve into the wing like this. So when you turn over to the side, you lose the lift on the side that is got the main lift. So automatically you're making the foil unstable. So you're making it so that it turns a lot easier by adding in that little bit of a curve.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess the downside of adding curve is that it makes it a little bit less efficient because the tips are not creating as much lift, right? Yeah.
Yes.
For the surface area.
Yes, your actual area versus your projected area is not very close. There's a gap between the two, so then you lose efficiency.
Right. Yeah. So last week I talked to Adrian from Axis Foils, and he said to him, the surface area of the wing of the foil is not as important as the wingspan and the aspect ratio and things like that. Like he said, that's why they use the wingspan as a measurement rather than the surface area. But your foils, you measure the surface areas in square inches. Is that the number on the foils? Always the surface area in square inches, correct?
Yeah.
And then is that the projected surface area or the
No, it's actual.
The actual
actual surface area. Yeah.
Okay. So how would you say a high aspect foil? It seems like it creates a lot more lift at the same surface area, right? If it has a wider wingspan but a smaller surface area, it seems like it creates a lot more lift, right? Is that correct? Would you say?
It does generate a bit more lift. It's more efficient. So the lift that it generates it with a lot more efficiency. So your surface area dictates what amount of force your foil can pick up. Not your span, not your chord. They do to a degree, but the main thing is the surface area of the foil. So that's why we measure our foils in surface area.
Right.
In hydraulics, the formula is F equals P times A. Pressure times your area. It's got nothing to do with span or anything. And it's the same with the foil. When you're designing a foil and you design a foil to lift a certain weight, you go on the surface area times the coefficient of lift, not the span. So, if we had to measure our foils with span, our low aspect foil has the same span as, for example, A Viper 90 has the same span as a Vortex 150.
Right.
So, if I had to say that the foil is measured on the span, it would be very confusing to go through the different ranges or different designs of foils, based on those numbers.
Right.
When somebody phones me up and says, "What size foil do I need?" the first thing I ask them is, "What is your weight?"
Right.
Because your weight dictates what size foil you're going to riding at whatever speed, not the span of the foil.
Right, that makes sense. So, but I guess because, like you said, because the high aspect foils are more efficient, they basically create less drag. So you basically you can go faster, and then that creates more lift because you're going faster. Is that basically why it feels like a smaller high? It just seems like a smaller high aspect foil, smaller surface area high aspect foil creates more lift than a bigger low aspect foil to me, but I guess it's because of the speed, yeah, because you're traveling at higher speeds.
Yeah, so a high aspect foil will have a much wider speed range. A low aspect foil tends to ride in a much narrower speed range, and then it blows out. Whereas a high aspect foil can ride slower and it can ride faster. So your speed range on a high aspect foil, the speed window is definitely bigger. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, people used to say, like, for beginners, it's better to use a low aspect foil because it's more predictable and easier to use, versus high aspect foil. Would you say that still applies, or would you say that the
Yes.
speed? Yeah.
Yes. I wouldn't necessarily even go to a low aspect foil, just a medium aspect foil. To learn to foil on a high aspect foil is you're going to make the journey very painful. It's not recommended. There's tons of guys that have done it. Now I'm talking about surf foiling. For wing foiling, different kettle of fish. For surf foiling, to learn to surf foil on a high aspect foil, I definitely don't recommend it. And also it depends on your skill levels and your abilities and stuff. But generally, I wouldn't recommend to learn to surf foil on a high aspect foil. It just makes it so much harder, so much more difficult. With wing foiling, it's very different because you've got the third or something to hold on to. So your stability is you're way more stable with a wing in your hands or a kite in your hands than without. So for wing foiling, that's fine. You can start to learn on a high aspect quite easily.
Okay. So would you say that wing foiling is one of the easiest ways to learn how to foil, or like you said, learn behind a boat? So yeah, I guess behind a boat is probably one of the easiest ways. But without having a boat, if you want to teach yourself, what would you say is the easiest way to get into foiling?
Oh, without a doubt, wing foiling it's way easier than kite foiling. Without a doubt, wing foiling is so much easier, so much easier. And it's like I say, if you have the correct gear, you can be foiling in 3-4 sessions, easily. Okay, it depends on age, abilities, conditions, but you can be easily foiling, in 3-4 sessions. I've got a bunch of mates that have learned to wing foil who already are foiling, however, but to learn to wing foil, they're riding toe side on their first session. But as I say, if it is possible, and you can go out behind a boat first, just to get that initial feeling of the foil picking you up out of the water. It's very weird, when you first do it. And if you're learning with just a wing as a power source, it's a bit of a challenge, but it's certainly a lot easier than trying to learn with a kite. That's next level.
Yeah, totally agree on that. So I recently started using a more high spec foiling, and one thing I noticed is that when you hit some turbulence in the water, like there's foam in the water or something from a wave, it seems like they just drop right away. Versus like a lower aspect foil will kind of be less sensitive to turbulence. So why is that? Why are they more sensitive to the turbulent water?
Don't know, hard to say. I just presume because it's the amount of water on the surface area of of the bottom of the foil, just because it's aerated. Yeah, don't know.
Yeah. So you're not like, yeah, I was kind of puzzled why that is. I guess it's just maybe because, like you said, it doesn't travel over the foil as long. So maybe, yeah, I don't know, but I thought you
Don't
might
know.
have an answer for that.
No, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah. Okay. But I like your explanation of why they have less drag, just basically because it takes the water less time to travel from the front leading edge to the trailing edge, right? So it kind of just slips through the water faster.
Yeah, and also your parasitic drag is also a lot lower because on a high aspect foil, you'll find that your foil 9 times out of 10 is going to be a lot thinner, than a low aspect foil. So low aspect foils tend to be quite fat and chunky, whereas high aspect foils are a lot thinner. So you also get lower drag just from your frontal drag.
Yeah. So, and you said you're redesigning your high aspect foils, your hyper lineup. You're going to come out with a new version of it soon, or?
Yeah, so the hypers have been out now, like I said, 5 years now. I think that came out 2017, and a lot of guys want to go faster. So the hypers were made to cruise at 22, 23 k's an hour. That's just their cruising speed. So yes, they can go a lot faster, but the Hyper 2s are now going to be purely for winging. And then we're bringing out a different range for downwinding. So the Hyper 2s are going to be quite a bit faster. The stall speed will be a little bit higher. They're going to be aimed purely at wing foiling. So with wing foiling, you can have a higher stall speed on the foil, because you've got that source of power.
So, like how much higher is the stall speed? I mean, even for wing foiling, I kind of like being able to kind of like at the end of a jibe or attack, if you're almost stalling, and then you can kind of pump back out of it. It's kind of nice to be able to do that without dropping off, right? So, but but having a super efficient foil is also really nice, and then having like a higher top end, but I guess it kind of always comes at a price on the low speed as well, right? So, but when you're talking a faster profile, is it just thinner, or like what? How did you make it faster? I'm just curious.
It's a completely different section. So the section that was used on the original Hyper, the maximum thickness was at 25%, if I remember correctly, somewhere around there. And now the maximum thickness has just been moved further back. So you have a little bit less lift. You make the foil. Excuse me. So when I made the Hypers, because I didn't have access to a CNC machine, I didn't have the luxury of trying many different variations. Nathan and Ivan were flying to Hawaii to do the H2O, N2O, and I didn't have the luxury to, try this foil and that foil and try this section. So I had to play it safe, if I can put it that way. So I had to use a profile that I knew for definite would work. I didn't want to make a foil that was too fast and just too advanced that would stall. If you had a stall halfway out and you couldn't get going again, it would be game over. So I had to come up with a foil that I knew was going to work and it was going to play it safe. And I knew from the data at the time that he had a very good chance of a podium finish, even winning the race because of the speed of the foil. And I could calculate over the distance, what sort of time it would take him, to complete the race. But I mean, that was 5 years ago, so things have changed. Guys' abilities are just going through the roof, and so many people who have got the talent and the skill to push the foils now. We've got access to stronger carbon. We've got access to higher speed. So it's just what the guys want. They want to go faster and faster. So yeah, it's about time that we do a revision on the hypers.
Yeah, I mean, the technology has changed so much in just the last few years, and they haven't had the race because of COVID. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Like, it'll be probably a whole different ball game, by the time they hold it again next year, maybe. I guess it's not happening this summer either. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see all the progression. So, and then what about the aspect ratio? Did you keep that about the same, or did you make it even more high aspect, or?
It has gone a fraction higher. They're sitting at about 8-1 now. 8, just over 8, somewhere around there.
Okay.
So just a little bit higher on the aspect ratio. So we're going to be releasing the first 3, which is the 170, the 190, and the 210 first. And then at a later stage, we'll release other sizes.
And you said there's different wings for winging and for downwinding, or are they going to be the same just by size, or how?
We bring it out at a completely different range for downwinding.
Oh wow. So, and then what about mass? I was curious about mass lengths. It looks like at this time you only have 2 different sizes of mass. Is that correct?
3. We've got 750, 830, and 950.
Oh, you have a 950. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on the website yet.
Yeah.
Is it on the website? I don't even know.
I think on the website it only had like 2 options when you look at the mass, choosing the mass. Oh yeah, 750 and 830. But so you also have a 950.
Yes, the 950 is also.
And that's something I think definitely for wing foiling, it's nice to have a little bit longer mast because the chop and stuff, you can just kind of fly over the chop without without having to like follow the contours of the water basically as much. But I guess for downwinding and surfing, having a longer mast can be a disadvantage because you're not as connected to the foil. You're kind of more up higher.
It's just that little delay that it takes turning from rail to rail on a long mast. Your timing's different, everything's different. So generally, the guys start on a 750, and if you're riding slightly bigger waves, then the 830. The 950 is it's not as popular. I use a 950 if I'm out in the open ocean. Like you say, you don't have to hunt all the time, skimming over the troughs. That's just, on the long mast, it's awesome. You just blast over the top. Mm-hmm. But generally in the actual waves themselves, I won't use a 950. I don't like the delay from turning from rail to rail. I prefer the 830. It's, way better.
Okay. Interesting. And then, so what about mast stiffness or like the whole stiffness? What's your take on the importance of stiffness, and like, would you say it's very important, and like what are you trying to accomplish with stiffness or versus flex and stuff like that? That's a lot of people asking that question.
So, I mean, you have to follow the trend. So if people want stiffer mast, you've got to supply a stiffer mast. So if that's the trend and that's what people want, then that's what you have to supply. I personally don't, on the wing foil, our masts are, for me personally, are more than stiff enough. We have actually, we're working on an extra stiff mast at the moment. I've just ridden the first 2 prototypes, and they're extremely stiff. If they're totally necessary, again, it's up to each individual what they want. If you want a very stiff mast, yes. So for me, I like the efficiency of a thin mast. Our standard masts are 12 millimeters thick at the base. So once you've ridden a mast with that efficiency and that speed, to go to a really thick mast, it's that's what we love about hydrofoiling, is the efficiency. So
Right.
you're chopping off efficiency. So if you can still have a thin mast that has the stiffness that you require, then so much better. Than riding a 20 millimeter thick mast. If, however, you're required to need such a stiff mast, for pumping or for whatever it is, then that's what you need to get. So we've also got an extra stiff mast. It'll be available soon. It's not on the website yet. We're just finalizing the layup and the stiffness.
Yeah. And then I've noticed too that your basically your front wing and your fuselage is all one piece, and I guess that's also to take out any kind of play or flex between the front wing and the fuselage, right?
So this is something that I learned right at the beginning of making foils, because my foils used to be separate. The fuselage and the front wing used to be separate, and I quickly realized that this is a weakness on the foil. Just because of the twist. So you'll see there are no manufacturers that make, or none that I can think of, that make a separate carbon fiber fuselage. And the reason for this is because of the manufacturing process of having a two-part mold. Because when you close the mold, you have a join line, and if your material doesn't cross that join line, carbon is its weakest in shear, and that fuselage just splits open the moment you apply a force on it. So right in the beginning, I realized that having these big wings on a separate fuselage is not going to work. That's why you'll see when guys have got separate fuselages, 9 times out of the 10, they're made out of aluminium. So the first generations of the unifoils, the fuselage and the front wing were all just one piece. But the shipping and the traveling with it was just a nightmare. It was very difficult to travel with it. And that's why we then put a split in the fuselage. But a one-piece front wing and fuselage is far superior to having a connection there. And you'll see quite a few manufacturers have changed over to this design purely for that, because it is superior in stiffness.
Right.
The moment you have a join there, your join allows for movement.
So can you still adjust the angle between the front wing and the tail wing, or is there some way you can trim it?
Yeah. Imperative, absolutely imperative that you are able to tune the foil to your liking. So yeah, that's a given. You have to be able to tune your foil to your liking. I've had 2 riders come off from a tow session, and the one rider says to the other one, "Oh, if it just had a little bit more front foot pressure," and the guy's like, "No, you mean a little bit more back foot pressure?" And the guy's like, No, a little bit more front foot pressure. And they've just ridden the exact same foil, and they've got 2 different feels, So if he wants that little bit more front foot pressure and you can't adjust that angle, what do? So if you have different weights, if one person weighs 80 kilos and the other one weighs 90 kilos, you're going to want to have a different feel. Fair enough, it takes years of experience to actually be able to feel the difference and to start to fine tune, as to what you actually like and what works well with your, what do you call it, ergonomics that you like in your style of riding. But there's definitely a shift in foilers going from back foot pressure to front foot pressure. A lot of guys start foiling and they all ride back foot pressure, and slowly but surely they're transitioning over to front foot pressure because they see the advantages of it.
So talk a little bit about the construction process and how involved are you in it and so on, and how are your foils made?
Yeah, so we've had a absolute nightmare with manufacturing, just from being able to produce the volumes that we need. and the one manufacturer that we had didn't follow the layup requirements, that are stipulated to the factory, and they applied what they've been doing for another customer, and I said, these wings are not going to work if you don't do the layup exactly the way I tell you to do them, and we had a batch of foils fail. So that was extremely frustrating, and to get them to follow instruction was also frustrating. So in the end, we actually had to find a different manufacturer who would follow instructions, implicitly exactly the way I wanted them to lay these foils up. And when we had the first vipers come off from this factory, I said to our partner in Australia, cut the thing. And he's like, what? And I said, cut it. So they cut the foil up into, I think, 7 or 8 different pieces. And we just reverse engineered it, because when you burn carbon, you burn the epoxy off and you're left with just the carbon, and you can see exactly how it's been laid up. And I just wanted to be sure that they followed instruction on the way it must be laid up, and they literally followed every single layer, and the vipers are absolutely bomb-proof. You can go crazy on them. They are so strong. So yeah, very, very happy with our current manufacturer. Just all the details, all the small little details, they're following to the T. So our current manufacturer is the best that we've had, and the quality of the product shows it.
Oh, excellent. Glad to hear that.
The fitment is beautiful. The finish is beautiful. The strength is beautiful. The flex, everything on it is just world class. I'm very, very happy with our current manufacturer.
So I'm assuming, because to make a large volume production, you have to basically go to a big factory in Asia, probably, right? So how has COVID affected that? I mean, I guess it's really, really hard because you can't really travel to the factory and see what they're doing. So you kind of have to wait to get it and cut it open and see if they actually did what you asked them to do, right? So
pretty much.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, we kind of had a lot of issues with our stand-up paddleboard production and stuff too during COVID. So actually, let's talk about COVID a little bit. Like, how was that in South Africa? It was pretty bad too for a while, right? With COVID.
Yeah. They shut the country down for quite a while, and then pretty much standard protocol throughout the world, I think. And then slowly started reopening up with a lot of restrictions. It was difficult. Obviously, I stopped R&D here. It was very difficult for Unifoil, because we had just started on the Vipers. We'd moved factory, and it put huge delays in our manufacturing. So we literally went down to an absolute crawl with being able to supply a product, because we had nothing.
That's so frustrating, because especially during the pandemic, so everybody wanted to get in the water because they had free time, right? So everybody wanted to buy stuff, but it was so hard to get anything, difficult, challenging.
Yeah, very much.
So would you say that, going forward, for Unifoil, what are some of the biggest challenges for you right now? What would you say that what's keeping you up at night?
Again, it's one of those things of being able to keep ahead as to the call for product, for which way is the market going, and to be on top of that, and to listen to what people want. That is very important. For example, like you're bringing up stiff masts. If people want stiffer masts, then you need to be able to supply that. That alone is a challenge, because you need to be able to read the market and read what's required.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that sometimes people don't realize is that everything's a compromise. Like you said, like if you want stiffer, you can make it thicker, you can make it heavier, but then is that going to be better? It depends on the person. But a heavier person with a big wingspan foil, for them, might make a big difference having an extra stiff mass but
Yes,
a lighter rider with a smaller foil that's surf foiling, they
exactly,
might prefer a really
exactly,
thin mass and they don't mind a little bit of flex. So it really
totally.
depends on the use case and stuff like that, right? So, and
Yeah, I
you
mean,
always give up, you give up one thing and you get another thing. So, but yeah, there's no free lunch in designing things, right? So
for me, I say pick two: fast, cheap, or stable. Which two do you want? Because as you say, it's all about compromise. If you take from here, you've got to give there. If you give there, you've got to take here. So it's all about compromise. And that it's also a bit frustrating because you can't make each foil for each specific rider. So you can have a guy that weighs 200 pounds that is riding a Viper 90 on a towing, but you can also have a person that weighs 120 pounds ride the exact same foil, and they can do. But it'll be nice to have one where the lighter rider rides a lighter foil. But
right.
it's impossible to manufacture like that. It's
Yeah, and
just
you
too
want to be able
difficult.
to use the same mass on your big foils as you would on a small toe-in foil, right? You don't want to switch. Well, I mean, ideally, yeah, you would use a thinner mass for the higher speeds, um,
Yeah,
but it's not really realistic that to buy
yeah,
different,
yeah, yeah.
especially the carbon masks are so expensive. So,
Mm.
like we got into foil build construction for a while too, and we had so many problems that I just kind of gave up on it because I just leave it to guys like you that specialize in it. But one thing that I found really interesting when we were laying up mass and testing them was like if you have the unidirectional fiber, like how do you um, put the layers together? Because if you put them all straight, then you get a very stiff mass that's stiff side to side, but then it has like the torsional twist, right? And then if you put them at 45-degree angles, then you get like torsional stiffness, but not so much side bending stiffness. And then I kind of started reading up on it, and I guess there's like all kinds of for jet fighters and stuff. They make carbon wings, and it's pretty complicated technology. But yeah, like I guess it's probably your secret sauce. But do you want to talk a little bit about that? How you do the layups and stuff?
Nothing makes up for experience. Experience is the key. My very first carbon mask that I made out of a mold was a 100% flop because
Right.
the first mask that I made was just over a wood core, and it was perfect, it was just fine. And the first mold that I made, I just thought, if I go a little bit thick on the carbon, this mask is going to be incredibly stiff. And I'm talking 7 years ago. Is it 7 years? Yeah, 7 years ago. And I made this mask, and it is an absolute noodle. It was terrible, and I was like, what's going on here? What did I miss? And I just did a little bit of research and a little bit of reading on it, and I was like, I just missed the absolute basics of it. And when you have a mast that is constant chord versus a mast that is tapered, your tapered mast is far superior to a constant chord. And so I quickly climbed on the CNC, cut a tapered mast, and yeah, night and day difference. But for actual layup schedules, you just have to test. You have to lay up, do flex tests, and yeah, see what sort of stiffness you require from that.
So why is a tapered mass better? I mean, I guess obviously the forces close to the board are the highest, right? Right where the mass attaches to the board. But why
Yes.
is that, and why? why is it more efficient? Or why does a tapered mast
It's
work
just the
better?
mechanics of it. It's just the mechanics of how it works. You driving your two faces in a triangle. It's and the thickness, because those two layers are trying to share each other. So when you push those two layers apart from each other, your strength goes up exponentially. So if you can make the base of the mast thicker and then tape it down, because you only have probably a third of the mast in the water most of the time. So if you can have just the part of the mast that's exposed to the water as thin as possible, you definitely have a superior mast to a constant chord mast.
Mm-hmm. And then, but doesn't it cause more like torsional flex and stuff at the bottom end of it if it gets thinned out at the bottom, or? And,
you do have a little bit more torsional flex. Again, it's what is acceptable, and what are you chasing? What are you trying to achieve with this mast? If you want a super stiff mast, then nothing makes up for the thickness of the cord. If you go to a thicker cord, it's always going to be superior than going to a higher modulus carbon. You can get away with a low modulus carbon on a very thick cord mast, because that distance is imperative. It's what makes it so much stronger.
Okay. Well, thanks for this deep dive into foil design. Do you want to talk a little bit about other equipment? I know you make wings as well. So, like, what are you trying to optimize for in wing design, and like what's your goal?
So we're onto our third generation wing now. Again, it's also been a long learning curve. I don't design the wings myself. We have a designer who designs for the manufacturer. Mm-hmm. But we just wanted a wing that was user friendly. So something that had a lot of low end grunt, because I think that's where a lot of guys struggle is the initial takeoff on the wing. So to have low end grunt was definitely high on the list. And then just very user friendly. We didn't want anything that tucked or dived. That is actually the first generation that's shown there. So we're actually 2 generations down from that. Those are old pictures.
Okay.
We've just released our new wing. It's called the Pinion. It's on the latest foiling magazine. You'll see there's an advert in the latest foiling magazine.
Okay.
That'll be released probably in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, kind of thing.
So how is it different from these older designs?
Everything from the actual outline of the wing to the materials used. Using triple ripstop in the canopy, and just refined many things. Like to me, what I didn't like on the initial wings was the amount of handles. I don't like a wing with lots of handles. That you've got to move your hand from handle to handle. So that was one of the first things that we changed. So the new wing has only got 3 handles, which makes a huge difference that in tunability, that you can just move your hand slightly up and down the handle, and to get wherever you want to hold the wing, and then just clean the wing up. There you can see on that picture there's only 3 handles.
Which picture? Sorry.
A little bit lower down.
Lower down.
If you scroll.
This one here?
Yeah, a little bit more. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, this one here.
That one. Yeah. Well, actually, that was the 2nd generation. If you just close that and you look at the one just above where he's jumping in the air. Yes, that one. You'll see there's only 3 handles on that wing. Right. So that is our current design.
Okay, and then it's also still without windows though?
So the 5 meter and the 6 meter has windows. The 2, 3, and 4 doesn't have a window.
Mm-hmm.
just because the bigger sizes tend to be that little bit bulkier and, to move a big wing out of the way. So we decided to put windows on the bigger sizes.
Yeah. Okay. And then what, do you design boards as well, or not at this time?
We are in the process of doing our boards. Again, the website will be updated very soon. We're working on a completely new redesign of our whole product list. So over the next probably three months, you'll see that there's going to be a huge change in products available on the website.
Nice. Yeah, Glenelle is one of your team riders or distributors here on the North Shore too, right? And I interviewed her as well, and she's pretty amazing. She was like wing foiling, pregnant at like overdue already, like she was already supposed to be in the hospital giving a birth, but she was still winging in big waves. So, but anyways, she's amazing. And yeah, so and she seems to really like the foils, and she's amazing on the foils. So cool to see that. And Tedford as well. So I know there's some good riders here using them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the foiling scene like in South Africa? Like what, I guess I mean, where you live, it's kind of a crowded, isn't it? Like a Jeffreys Bay is kind of a crowded surf spot, right? So it's not easy to foil there, right? So what do you do for foiling? Like, where do you go? Where is it where the happening place is, and what's going on? So
our conditions don't favor foiling that much here in Jeffreys Bay itself. If you go down to Lower Point, where the waves got a little bit less energy, you can foil there. However, you are going to upset a lot of the locals. So we don't recommend it. Foiling and surfing is two different things, and I think safety is very important. So if you are going to foil there, you need to be a competent foiler, and you need to know what you're doing, and you need to steer clear of the surface, because you're just going to upset them. So I don't recommend foiling, at the surfing spots here. We have got other places that you can go foiling. We mainly tow foil, so we've got the luxury of being able to choose from a variety of secluded spots where it's just, two guys and that's it. But with wing foiling, we have got a southwesterly wind that blows here, which blows from the town next door, St. Francis, to Jeffreys Bay. It's about 10 kilometers. And I've done it once, and it's awesome. So I'm really looking forward to the summer to be doing a lot more downwinding. That's pretty much, there's about 12, 15 guys, who are focusing on this, on doing this downwinding. So we're very excited. And is that
with wings? Oh, sorry. Is it with wings or with paddles?
No, with wings.
Okay.
Wings, definitely with wings. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just find it so much safer. If something goes wrong with a wing, it's just so much easier. I think later on we might progress to just being paddle only or prone only, but at the moment definitely with wings. The safety aspect is just so much higher with the wing. If something happens, if the wing dies, whatever happens. Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean it's just much easier with the wing, because you're always going to be able to get back up on foil again if it's windy enough. But but I've also heard horror stories of people like losing their wings, or like the leash ripping and the wings go flying away, and you're like way outside on a small wingboard, and then you have to paddle in. So yeah. I don't know if you've ever lost a foil board.
I've never lost a board. Well, actually, I've broken leashes before on the board, but usually in the waves, and then usually the board ends up in the channel somewhere, and you can get it. But the wing, like I actually lost the wing one time, and it just ended up, like from Diamond Head, it ended up in Waikiki, and somebody got it, and then I got it back like weeks later. But somebody heard that I lost it. But yeah, it's a good idea to put your name and phone number on your wing.
Yeah, if
That
your
does
leash
happen.
breaks, if your leash breaks on a foil board and you're out at sea, there's no way you're catching that board. It's gone.
Yeah, on
It
strong
just
winds.
takes off, and it just it just goes on its own. So safety is extremely important. We don't want to hear of any incidences happening. So we always go out in a group. Because we're still in early days, we will go out with a backup jet ski or a backup boat, just in case something happens. You rip your wing, whatever it is. We just want it to be a pleasant experience.
Yeah, and then also always go out with other people. Like the buddy system is always a good idea. You don't want to do stuff by yourself and get in trouble.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's putting a lot of us off is a lot of us come from a kiting background, and because our wind is offshore, we never kite in an offshore wind because it's just too dangerous. Whereas if you go wing foiling, you eliminate a lot of that danger just because the dynamics of wing foiling is just so much. It works well even in an offshore wind. Not recommended for a beginner, obviously, but having that mentality of coming from the kiting background, it really is something that sits in your mind. It's like, I'm going in offshore wind. So
Yeah,
it's just one of those hurdles that we need to get around. What I find is guys who don't have a kiting background, they feel nothing. They just go and jump in the water and there they go. Because they haven't had that fear put into them from going in offshore wind with a kite. So, yeah, challenging.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I never really got that much into kiting. I was into windsurfing for many years, and then kiting came around. I was like, I like windsurfing better still, but I tried it a few times, but I never got good at it. So, but then when winging came around, to me that was like the freedom of not having the wing attached to the board and being able to. It's kind of like a little bit of a hybrid between kiting and windsurfing, right?
I so wish that I started earlier with this winging, because I still stuck with a kite. And I only started last year with it, and I so wish that I started early on, because when it actually came out, I bought a wing that was too small, and it was just frustration. It was just so frustrating. And then last year I got a couple 6 meters, and total game changer for me. Having a wing that's the correct size. And yeah, I wish I started 2 years ago with it, because it, like you say, it gives you that freedom, and you can go anywhere you like. And what really appeals to me is to be able to depower the wing. On a kite you can't do that. When you're on the wave, you've got such a narrow section that you can ride in. If you go a little bit too far to the left, then the kite tosses out the sky. If you go too far to the right, then you're pulling against the kite. So you've got such a narrow little spectrum that you need to ride in. Kite foiling, whereas wing foiling, go for it. You go where you want. Off a wave, power up again, and you're going.
Yeah, I mean, with the kite too, you can't like totally depower it, because then it drops out of the sky. You always got to cap some pull in the lines, right? So with the wing, you can really totally just like depower it, and it's pretty much not there anymore, almost. And it's like it's like towing surfing without needing a jet ski. Really, you can tow yourself into waves basically, which is pretty cool. Not exactly like if it's strong offshore winds, it does catch quite a bit of wind wind, and it's kind of hard. It'd be nice to not have it on the wave, but I guess there's some guys like experimenting with like getting on the waves and dropping the wing with a weight or something, and then coming back later to get it.
I've seen some of those videos. The guy just tosses the wing and there he goes, and I'm like, yeah, I'd like to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But anyway, so I guess in South Africa, the biggest wing foil scene is probably in Cape Town, then, right? That's because there's wind and there's like a
Very
big wind
much.
scene and everything. So
Yes.
is that where you like? Where would you say do you sell the most foils? Like, is it in South Africa, or which market is the most lucrative for you or the most successful?
Well, I only deal with South African distribution, so I only sell in South Africa. But yeah, Cape Town definitely is by far the fastest growing and the biggest scene. It just works there. There you've got wind all the time in the summer season. So yeah, it just works really well.
Yeah, and a lot of Europeans come because it's when it's winter in Europe, it's summer in Cape Town, and they go down there to enjoy the wind,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I was in Cape Town quite a few years ago, and I hadn't been to Dolphin Beach in years. And pitching up there, and you see literally 50, 60, 70, 80 kites. It's crazy. It's just hundreds of kites.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's not the case where you are, and yeah, so I guess it's actually kind of more rare to see people foiling there in Jeffreys Bay, I guess, or not,
Yeah.
not as many places to go.
No.
Interesting. So but I mean, are there ways that are kind of like when you do go tow foiling? Are there ways that you can get super long rides on the foil like that? Like those kind of secret spots you're talking about, or
Yeah, we've got like our local spot where when the swell comes through, we just go through and tow there. But there are some places where you can get really long rides. Yeah, for tow foiling, it's completely different because of like I said, you've got the accessibility to choose where you want to go ride. We don't really have crazy big waves or anything here. There's a couple guys in Cape Town that ride Dungeons, which is a massive wave. It's an absolute monster of a wave. Not for me though. It's it's a bit a bit crazy.
I mean, here on the North Shore, a lot of times when there's big waves when you're wing foiling, you can catch the wave like from 2 miles out and ride it for like almost a mile before you get to where the surfers can catch it, So we got like this huge playground, and then we just kick out, and then the surfers get like the last little bit right before the wave hits the beach, right? So, but so it's pretty cool. It just opens it way up to be able to get, the foils are so efficient that you don't need a steep wave. You just need a kind of a little bit of a wall or like something you can ride,
I think as the sport progresses, I think you'll have a lot more people seeing exactly that. That's why surfing never really appealed to me, because the amount of time that you're on the wave and the amount of time that you had to dedicate to the sport, I just didn't have that that luxury of that time. And to go for a 2-hour surf session and catch 3, 4, 5 waves, of 20, 30 seconds each, that didn't really appeal to me. Whereas kiting, you're on the board all the time. You have a 2-hour session, you're on the board for 2 hours. And I think this is when more surfers see the appeal of foiling, where you like you say, you can go out crazy far and you can ride for so much longer. I really think that we're in the infancy of wing foiling. It's just going to grow exponentially. Yeah.
Do you think it's going to get crowded, or where people are going to be kind of like not telling other people where they're going because they don't want more people to show up or something like that?
I think we're still a long way from that, because there are so many spots. It's the same as surf foiling. Guys are now looking at areas that you'd never consider to go and surf because the conditions don't work. So I think it's going to be the same with wing foiling. As long as you've got a decent wind, a steady wind, then it doesn't even have to be that steady, but consistent. You go jump in the water and have a blast with that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful things about wing foiling is that you can really do it anywhere. You don't need waves, really. You just need water and wind, and so you don't need like a big beach where you can launch a kite or whatever. You can just like walk down some rocks and jump in and go wing foiling, pretty much anywhere.
Exactly.
So it really opens it up to pretty much anywhere in the world, really, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So for you, like you said, you've been winging for about a year. You wish you've done it sooner and stuff. But would you say for learning, is it mostly practice, or is it more talent, or like for yourself, would you say that you you learn is it just putting in the time to get better, or do you take things from other sports and it's like certain things you already kind of know and learned and observed and so on?
To me, wing foiling is no different than riding a bicycle. If you can ride a bicycle, does it require talent to ride a bicycle? Not really. It requires the time to climb on it and to spend that time to get your muscle memory to recognize, the inputs that are required to balance. And wing foiling is exactly the same. So anyone that is able, that has the time to dedicate to the sport, can do it. You do need a measure of fitness, especially when you climb on that board and you fall off, and you climb on that board, it wears you out pretty quick. So you do need a level of fitness, but if you can ride a skateboard, you can wing foil. That's the way I see it. If you've got the time to dedicate to it, you don't need any special talents or anything like that. No. Obviously, if you don't come from a boarding background, it's going to take a little bit longer. But I think it's definitely is not a very difficult sport to learn. I would say it's pretty much on par to learn to kite surf. Arguably, maybe even easier, because you don't have that fear of being, ripped through the air. So I suppose you do have the fear of falling on the foil, but I mean that's But to anyone, if you're looking to start wing foiling, the sensation is just incredible. It's when you're a spectator and you watch it, it's a bit boring. It's like, it doesn't look that great. But when you're on that foil and you're flying, it's an incredible sensation.
Yeah, it's funny because pretty much everybody, including myself, when they first saw winging, they were like, that doesn't look that cool, It's like when you try it and you're like,
I said the same thing.
You're instantly hooked on that sensation of flying over the water. It's incredible, and just being able to do it without stopping. Like when you're surfing, you always have to like paddle back out, and then you got like another minute on the foil, and then you have to spend 10 minutes to catch your next wave. But winging, you're just like always flying back and forth, and you can it's an amazing sensation. I agree.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your friend Gumby. He's actually the one who emailed me and told me I should interview you and stuff. So, but he said he's your towing partner.
Yeah. So I've known Gumby for quite a few years, and as I said earlier, when I was at I think I was at his mum-in-law's place, and he saw this that tow foil, that kite foil in the back. I mean, he's a full-on surfer, and he saw that, and I could see something he's intrigued by it. But those first few sessions that got him going, the stoke was just through the roof. It was incredible. It was just so awesome to see him ride this foil, and it was really, really a milestone. Well, this is the beginning for Unifoil's surf foiling. And then just through the years, he's pretty much been the first guy to ride my prototypes. Now we've got dedicated team riders, but in the first early days, myself and Gumby would go out and tow foil, and we would test out whatever we were riding together. I learned how to tow foil from Gumby.
So when you go toe foiling together, are you similar weights? Or do you use the same board and foil setup, or each got your own? Use the same?
No, we use the same setup. I'm a little bit heavier than what he is.
Yeah.
He's, I think, 90s or mid 90s. He's taller than what I am, and definitely more skillful. Yeah, he's just got a really nice flow to his foiling. I struggled with the toe foiling coming from the kite foiling background. You know, it's the same as wing foiling. When you've got something in your hands, it just makes it so much easier. You've got that stability to turn and everything. So because I didn't surf, when I don't have that stability in my hands, it took me a while to get that feeling of just standing on the board and not having that extra support in your hands. So it took me a while to get used to that.
Yeah, you have to be a lot more centered to fly on it without holding something in your hand. You have to be right over the foil. You can't be like offset a little bit.
Yeah. And on a kite or a wing, it's just so much more forgiving, because if you still lose your balance, you can just pull on the wing or pull on the kite.
Yeah.
When you're toe foiling, there's nothing to pull on. So, but yeah, we've had some really amazing sessions.
Awesome.
I've really enjoyed the towing.
Yeah. I have a friend, Jeff Chang, and when I go with him, I just use whatever he's using, so because I know he's like about the same weight and the same skill level, more or less. So we just always share the same board, and it's so much easier, right? But pretty much everyone else I know, each person has their own setup, so they have to have like one on the jet ski and one in the water, and then they have to switch it out and stuff like that. It's just and then when a big wave comes and you have to get that foil out of the water, you got two sets on your jet ski. It's kind of dangerous.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it's I think it makes a lot of sense to just have one board and foil to deal with, and rather than two, right?
And what's really cool is that we've got a system that works. We know how to tow each other into waves. We know how to pick each other up out of waves. We know that when you're in the crunch zone, we know how to get out of there.
So explain to me how exactly you do it. Like when there's a wave coming and there's a guy in the water, you got to pick him up quickly. How do you handle it? How do you manage the foil?
Well, what's different between Gummy and I is I'm goofy and he's natural. Oh. So I tow on the other side of the ski, he tows on the other side of the ski. So that's just the one thing. So when I tow him clockwise onto waves. When he tows me anti-clockwise onto waves.
And no straps on the board. Did you use straps?
No, strapless. So when we're in the white water, to be able to recover the board quickly enough and to recover the rider as well. So instead of trying to get the rider to get to the board to put it onto the sled, the driver of the jet ski just picks the board up and puts it in the footwell of the jet ski, and the foil just sticks out just to one side, and then the rider can just grab onto the sled and you're out of there. So we were talking the other day, and we're like, we need to put a handle on this board, because when you're trying to grab the board with just one hand, and that's the other thing is when you pick up the board, I naturally always go to pick up the board with my right hand, and that's your throttle hand, and I'm like, wrong side, So
and then you pull the strap off the throttle.
Well, I let go of the throttle, so I need to be able to keep my hand on the throttle. So now I need to use the other hand, but the other hand, as you say, has got the emergency kill switch. Right. So it's a bit challenging, but it's working. We've got our system quite refined, and it works well.
Yeah, so I mean that one way is to just get the board and then get the person or whatever. But like what we found, what works pretty well is like if you flip it upside down, have the foil sticking up, and then the jet ski driver grabs the foil and kind of puts it under, like puts the mass under his butt, sits on the foil, and then the rider jumps on the sled in the back.
If the rider and the foil are still together, then he just chucks the board onto the sled with the foil up, as you say, and he lies on the board, and then you're out of there. If the two get separated, then the guy that's riding the jet ski sometimes has to pick up the board.
Right.
So it depends on how it falls apart. But most of the time, I'll pick Gumby up, and then we'll go and pick the board up afterwards. But now recently, with the swell that we've had, because we don't use a leash, the boards ended up on the beach because it just takes off and it just goes. So we've been using quite a small foil lately, which we've been really enjoying. I was actually surprised, that we were riding such a small foil, but it's
What size wing are you riding in the?
It's a 90. It's the Viper 90. It's the smallest in the range. And I've had a few guys tow foil with it, and the first thing they say is that they're so surprised that it's a 90. They say it feels just so much bigger.
Yeah, I mean, when you have the speed, anything feels big because you create, like, the speed is what creates the lift, right? It's like when we go on a big wave, when you're going super fast, it's like it always wants to blow out of the water, no matter how small it is. That really, it seems like.
Yes. Well, I've actually got guys, they're phoning you up and they're like, can you make a smaller foil? We need something smaller. We need like a 60 or a 70. So I'm sure when I get a chance, I'll be making a few small prototypes.
Interesting. Yeah. So what's new, and like what does the future hold for foiling? Like, do you think we're kind of at a close to getting to the maximum performance, or are we still far away and still got a lot of room to improve?
There are things that I think are going to come into foiling. I've said a couple of years ago, it's just going to be a matter of time until someone starts putting moving surfaces into foils. I'm actually surprised no one's done it yet. Where you'll have stabilization on your foil. I started drawing it. I started toying with the idea, but I've just got so much work on at the moment to go down that rabbit hole. It's a long rabbit hole. But I think it's just a matter of time until someone puts a couple servos on a foil with a stabilization system, and then you can remove the stabilizer and you can have an app on your phone or a remote or whatever, and you can dial in whatever stability that you want on your foil. So I think that ultimately is the end game. Until someone does that.
Interesting. So you're talking like a servo that automatically stabilizes the foil, making it like kind of almost like an autopilot foil that you don't really have to control as much with your own body weight.
Well, you can control the sensitivity of the foil through it. So at the moment we use a shim to change the deckage angle. So you need to go and take the two screws out, put your shim in, or however your system works. Whereas if you have a digital foil, you just type in a number, and it'll automatically work to whatever you've adjusted it to. So it's not just your front foot pressure. You can change the roll rate. You can make it self-stabilize. You can make it unstable. The parameters are endless. And I think. Until it's done, we're not going to know. But I think that is going to change foiling again, the same way that high aspect wings changed foiling. I think digital foils will change foiling. It'll be like a huge step.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, actually, I interviewed Mark Rappahorst too, and he actually experimented with something like that. He said it was kind of a failed experiment.
Really?
But yeah, he wanted to make a foil that basically takes off easily at low speeds, for downwinders, easy to take off. But then as you go faster, you wanted to reduce the drag and have less lift. Basically, as you're going faster, you're going, the less lift you want. So
yes,
there's definitely kind of that would be awesome to have a foil that creates a lot of lift at low speeds when you want to take off, and then becomes low drag and low and fast at high speeds. So
exactly. If you just dial in a little bit of camber on your foil, like you say, as you take off, get you up on the foil, dial in a bit of reflex at whatever speed it is, or it can be tuned in gradually, and you're out of there. So that in my opinion is the ultimate. If it's going to be done, if it's possible to do it, we'll have to wait and see.
All right. So, so tell us a little bit more about yourself. Like, what's your daily routine like? Do you go surfing, or like what do you do for fun other than foiling and working? Like, do you have any other hobbies, or do you have a morning routine? What's your typical day like?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, you froze. Are you still there?
Yeah, no. So as I was saying, I mean, I've got a list that I work to, and I just go through whichever task has priority, and I just work through that list. So like today, obviously we dialed in to do this podcast, and then this afternoon I'm going toe foiling. So I've got some new gear that I want to try out. We've come out with a new range of tail stabilizers. I'll show you here.
Yeah, show us what you've done. So you basically get up in the morning, you go straight to your tasks and priorities, work on your priorities, and then go out to foiling, have fun, basically.
Well, listen, toe foiling is part of the job here.
Yeah, that's true. Right? Yeah.
So these are a set of tails. So all 6 of these tails are actually different. So
like those are CNC out of G10, or what is it kind of?
Yeah, these are all CNC G10s.
Kind of like how Cane to Wild does custom tails, right?
Yeah. So the purpose of these tails is it's a new idea that I've been working on, and it's to help the riders who are still riding with back foot pressure to transition over to front foot pressure and to see the advantages of it. So there are 3 tail stabilizers in the pack, and by going through the 3 different tails, it'll what's the word? It'll show you progressively how you're progressing in your foiling. So I wouldn't recommend them for an absolute newbie because you're not going to feel the difference. So once you're already foiling and you can do a top turn and a bottom turn, and now you're starting to become more efficient and you're starting to push your boundary, that's the purpose of these tails, is to push that boundary that little bit further. So that's what I'm working on. I'll be riding them today and trying them out, and just continue developing them. But that's one of the next releases that we're going to be doing.
Okay, so can you explain that a little bit to me? Because I was thinking, so basically, because the tail wing creates a downward force and the front wing creates an upward force, right? So when you have more back foot pressure, that means the tail doesn't have as much downward force, so you kind of have to compensate with your back foot pressure. So basically, by creating more downward lift, you create more front foot pressure. Is that correct?
That's right. So what it is, it's down to personal taste. And if you come from surfing, naturally you like more back foot pressure. Just about every foiler that I've spoken to that has come from surfing has started off, liking back foot pressure. But it has a disadvantage, and that is when you're charging down the face of a wave. Because what happens is the front of your board wants to dive, and now you need to lean backwards to stop the front of the board diving, and you're now shifting your center of gravity behind the center of lift, creating an unstable platform. So your fall now becomes very unstable, and it's difficult to control. And that's why I'm saying to the guys, start to shift over to front foot pressure. Because when you're charging and you charge down a wave, if you've got front foot pressure, you're shifting your center of gravity over the center of lift, naturally creating a stable platform. There's a saying for all the guys that fly radio control airplanes know, and that is, A nose heavy aeroplane flies terrible, but a tail heavy aeroplane flies once. And that's because it's unstable. It doesn't handle. And it's exactly the same with the hydrofoil. So if you're struggling with your foil setup and you have rear foot pressure, put in a shim or increase a little bit of the decklage angles, that you've got a little bit of front foot pressure, and automatically you'll make the foil more stable. So, and it's difficult. It's the same as guys that go from surfing to snowboarding. Surfing, all back foot pressure, and now you're going down a mountain, and now you've got to put all your front foot pressure onto your front foot going down a mountain. It's the last thing you want to do. But you've got to commit, and you've got to do it. And if you do that, then you can make the turn. And that's what I recommend to guys who are still foiling with rear foot pressure is to slowly transition over to front foot, and your stance, everything changes. And I think it's the next step on the ladder on your progression.
Yeah, it is a lot of parallels to snowboarding, where you kind of have to throw yourself down into the turn down the hill to carve a nice turn, right? You can't lean on your back foot.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's kind of the same. You want really because the front wing is you're riding the front wing, not the back of the wing, right? So.
Yeah. I personally like a very, very balanced foil. I don't like it. I don't like excessive front foot pressure. I try to keep my front foot pressure as light as possible. However, as you're going through the speed range, if you get to a point where the foil tucks, you don't have enough front foot pressure. So it becomes pitch sensitive. So if your foil is pitch sensitive, then you're riding a tail stabilizer that's too small. So either increase the surface area of your tail stabilizer, or increase the angle, so that it creates more downward pressure.
Have you played around with the angle of the mast, the way it attaches to the board? Like, I guess basically the board rocker. Like, I guess early on when people were just sticking the plate mount, stick-on mounts on their surfboards, and then they had a lot of rocker in the tail, and then the foil was angled down too much, and they couldn't get any lift on the takeoffs. And then people were using shims to get more lift. But then the thing is, the downside of having too much pitch angle, then you end up at higher speeds with flying kind of with the nose pointed downward to keep the foil in the water, right? So, have you played around with that? Like,
so
the mast.
So I saw that. I saw that right in the beginning when I started making plate mount masts, and I realized that I would say 70-80% of the foils that were being sold were being retrofitted into surfboards. And naturally, you have a rocker on the surfboard. So all the first generation unifoils all had a natural tilt in the mast. So the actual top base plate had a tilt already built into it.
Oh, yeah.
And I did those masts for probably 2 years, maybe 3 years. And then there were a lot of companies that were making dedicated foil boards, and I said to the guys, as long as the back of the foil board was straight, then you could use just a standard mast. But if you had a bit of rocker in, then either you need to shim the mast, to get the fuselage parallel to the board. That's pretty much how our first unifoils were made, with a built-in angle in the base plate. And then only later on, when the guy started making foil boards, that I actually changed to a flat base.
Yeah, but I think some people don't realize how much of a difference that makes in how the board feels. Like, if you put just a 1 degree shim between your mast and the board, it makes a big difference. Like, just how the board handles too.
Yes. And this is one of the things that I encourage, especially newcomers to the sport, is to move the gear around. Don't just put it in one place and force yourself to learn it. I took a couple guys out for a session, and just by moving the mast on the board made such a difference. Because I was riding, because I'm a heavier guy, and the guys that are taken out were a lot lighter. Just by shifting that mast just that little bit back made the difference whether they could actually get up and get foiling and whether they couldn't. So I highly, I highly recommend to, if you're a newcomer, to move your mast backwards and forwards in the boxes, because every foil is different, every manufacturer is different, and to try and dial in, the sweet spot that works for you, because what works for me is not necessarily going to work for you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then a lot of times it's not a big change. Like you don't need to move it like 2 inches. You just move it like a half an inch or something, and that'll make a noticeable difference for you, right?
And it's also even to the conditions. If I go out and I see conditions are big, then I'll shift the mast back a little bit. If I see conditions are small, then I'll shift it a little bit forward. So it doesn't necessarily just stay in one place. It all depends on and. Nothing makes up for experience. It's like with the kites, when the guys go out, what size kites should I use? It's the same with the foil. What setup should I use? Where should I put the foil? And by riding more and more, you become in tune with this. You know where to put the mast on the board. A little bit back, a little bit forwards. I think in a way, it's also been a frustration because I'm riding different gear all the time, and I don't become in tune with just one setup. Although I must admit, when I go out to the Gumby, he's like, Viper 130, where's it? Bring it, because that's all we ride, all we tow together. And now we've shifted over to the Viper 90. But that's in a way it's an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage of riding. The gears constantly changing, trying this and trying that and trying this, but I enjoy it. It's awesome.
It's kind of a dilemma for you too, because it's kind of part of your job to test different gear, and you always have to keep trying different things. But then on the other hand, to me, I'm kind of the guy that once I figure out what works, and then I like to just kind of make it my own.
Stick with it.
I just leave it, and then this works for me. I'm gonna, and then every time you ride it, you become more used to it, and it becomes kind of. You just develop those like the muscle memory. You just what the thing's going to do, right? So, but every
trust in the foil, yes.
It's like the analogy you said with the bicycle. Yeah, it's like learning to ride a bicycle, but every time you change the foil, you have to learn the new bicycle. Maybe the wheels are a little bigger or whatever, or the handlebars narrower or something. Like it's different every time you change something. You have to learn it again, right? So. But if you use the same one over and over again, you become very proficient and very used to it, where you don't have to think about it. It becomes a natural thing, and that's also very valuable. So I think both there's value to both trying new things and learning what it does, but also once you have something that works for you, just use it and get good at it. You don't always have to. Some people are just always buying new stuff and changing stuff, and they never really learn how to use it properly. So before they get the next one, right? So there's a little bit of truth to both, I think, right? So
yeah, very much.
All right. So what do you want to leave people with? People getting into wing foiling. I guess a lot of people that are watching, I think, are just learning and figuring things out. What do you want to?
I think what's important is I get so many guys that phone me up and I want a foil, and the first thing I ask is, what do you want to do with the foil? And when it's a complete newbie, he wants to do everything with the foil, and it's like, well, you need to pick which category do you want to go down. What kind of foiling do you want to do, and what do you want to do with the foil? So that's important, is what is your end objective? If you want to wing foil, because a wing foil setup is, you can transition it over to surf foiling, but it's not really ideal. You can use surf foiling on wing foiling equipment, yes, it is possible. But what's important is to see what is the most important thing to you. What are you going to be chasing? What is it that you want to achieve? So if it's wing foiling, it's important to get the correct gear for it. If it's surf foiling, get the correct gear for surf foiling. So that is my advice: is to buy the correct gear for the job. There's nothing worse than seeing something for sale secondhand. It's cheap, buying it, and it's not right. Rather get the right gear that's going to help you to achieve what you're wanting to do. From the right design to the right size. It's so important, so important.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's funny because a lot of beginners, like when they buy a foil board, they want like the 7-in-1, right? They want the one that's it's good for stand-up surfing, it's good for wing foiling, it's good for downwinding and front foiling too. And they want one board that does everything. And then it's like, we can order a board like that for you. That somebody makes one, but it's not going to be good for any of those things, because it's just like
it does all those things poorly. Yeah.
Doesn't do anything well, right? So, but I guess for a beginner that it might work because at least it gets them into it, right? It's kind of like the soft top surfboard that they buy at Costco to get them started. It's something to get in the water with and learn the basics. But then, once you figure out what you want to do, it's not going to be the right one anymore. It's not going to be the right board anymore. So, but anyway.
Yeah, it's also it's a very difficult line to to give advice on. With even board size. I see boards that are 160 liters. And I'm like, that is a massive board. I personally would never recommend someone to buy something like that because you're going to use it twice and you've outgrown it. So if it's for a surf school, yes, but to actually go and buy something that is that big, it's just too big. Unless you're a big guy or something. But it's so important that whoever's making the recommendation to the equipment that you're using specifies the correct equipment. That's so important.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and that's actually another good tip. Like when you're starting out, maybe go take a lesson at a school that has a 60-liter board that a couple of times, and then you buy a board, right? So,
yeah. Definitely, I highly recommend to hook up with the local guys and just get advice. What equipment are they using for the conditions that they're riding in, and you just need to do your research. Don't buy something on a impulse because it's the latest gear or it's cheap or it's whatever. I've seen such a surge to guys buying really high aspect foils. And then you see them all for sales, a few weeks later on eBay or whatever, because they don't accomplish what they're trying to do. So super important that you do your research and you get the gear that is right for you.
Yeah, don't get the gear that you need in 2 years or next year when you're good at it, right? That doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And it just makes the learning curve so much harder, and it just makes the whole journey unpleasant. It's not enjoyable because it's a frustration. That's one of the reasons why I never got into surfing, because I felt that I would come off the water more frustrated than what I would go in, and it just didn't appeal to me. So it's the same with foiling. If you don't get the right gear, you're going to come off the water more frustrated than what you are going into the water. So, again, get the right gear,
Winging can be very frustrating in the beginning, for sure. Or there's not quite enough wind to get up on the foil or something like that. You're just struggling and cursing.
It's the worst.
But once you figure it out and you're getting up on the foil, it's hard to compare it to anything else, really. Right? So.
It's an extremely rewarding sport, I must say.
Yeah. Okay, well, awesome. I think that's a good note to end it on. Thank you so much, Clifford.
Robert, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, and I'll probably try to call you again or so and see what's new, and maybe have your new website up with
all the new stuff. Will do. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robert.
Yeah, I think your dog needs some attention. And then maybe you'll have that new foil with the digital foil. Okay.
We'll see.
All right, Clifford. Have a great day.
Okay.
Aloha.
You too. Cheers, Robert. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we got a little bonus material here. I asked if he still had his first foil that he built, so he showed me this photo. So talk a little bit about that.
So that was the first prototype that I made. It was actually the cord was actually a lot less. You can actually see where I've extended it. You can see my mouse pointer, eh?
Yeah.
So the cord, the wing actually stopped over there, and then I added this section here on because the foil was too high aspect ratio and it just didn't have enough lift. So then I just patched on the back section here just to get an idea of what sort of size that I'd need. And yeah, you can see the dust on it. But yeah, that was the first surf foil that I ever made.
Awesome. And then this is all one piece, like you just glassed everything together, it looks like? Or
no, so that was a separate fuselage. So that fuselage was bolted onto the front wing. That's where I realized, the torque on the fuselage is just immense. It's not going to hold it. And that's when I changed the design to include the fuselage into the front wing, which has been probably one of the best things that I've done, because the force that is exerted through there is huge, and the proof of that is the amount of companies that have changed their designs to include the fuselage onto the front wing, because it's definitely superior. Your responsiveness that's just so crisp.
that makes sense, because basically your whole body weight gets transferred, or the foil creates the lift, and the force from the foil versus everything else kind of goes through that point on the fuselage, between the fuselage and the mast and the front wing. A lot of force.
It's the most stressed area on a foil, without a doubt. That connection from your front wing to through the fuselage to the mast, because you're twisting it, you're trying to shear it apart. So it's imperative that's really strong.
Yeah, and then I guess also the way you lay up the fibers inside the mold to handle those stresses is important too, right? Because you have to have basically the direction of the fibers has to match the direction of the stresses, right? And then it looks like you're using a tuttle box, or early on.
That was a what they call the KF box. It was specifically for kite surfing. It's a kite foil box. So the first generations of them had just one bolt in, and then later on they put 2 bolts in. So it worked well.
Okay, I thought that was a cool little bonus thing, but at the end the picture froze and I lost Clifford, and he said he had a power outage, so couldn't come back on. But that was cool to see his original foil, his first foil he built. That's where it all started, So he's definitely a pioneer, one of the first to design high aspect foils, record-breaking foils for downwinders and so on. So thank you, Clifford, for your time, and hope to see you again in a year or so. We'll come back for another show at some point. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate the Blue Planet customers that make this possible. The people that support Blue Planet make this show possible, so thank you for that. And that's it for today. I have another show coming up soon, so thanks for watching. Make sure to give it a thumbs up, and we'll see you on the water. Aloha.